how I increased my sleep scores from about 67 to now about 87 or 81 or 90. Now, there are a few steps involved, and I want to discuss all the different steps I took. I have to begin with a sleeping pattern that I thought was ideal. So there has been the Huberman sleep schedule, not to be confused with the Huberman sleep schedule, which is basically just the sleep schedule of Andrew Huberman. Now, because of this idea that you could maybe sleep less, I tried to maybe sleep less and therefore have more awake time in the last years. In the last years, I mostly therefore slept in various patterns that might have not been the healthiest, but also they gave me a lot of hours, and I'm not sure what is the right way. It just seems now that I've changed to a new pattern, which is basically simply from sleeping from 22, so from 10 o'clock in the evening to 6 o'clock in the morning, seems to be just easier all around. But I don't really know if I have that much less time or that much more time. This is something that has to turn out to be true or not true. But what has happened is, by changing my sleep pattern from basically 6 hours a night, so previously I would sleep from midnight till 6, and then I would additionally sleep during the day. So in the beginning, I planned, or at least in the last few years, I usually had 2 hours at noon scheduled for sleeping again. So I called this day sleep, and the other thing I called night sleep. And my body actually seems to have accommodated somewhat to sleeping 6 hours a night. But I also often would oversleep, and especially if my demands, my physical and mental demands would change over time, then what I realized again and again and again is that my sleep schedule just was too inconsistent. If I took a look at a graph from Garmin actually, then if these were kind of lines where it would say basically, or it would show your sleep times, then it would look like this, and then it would go up again, and then it would go down again. So it basically changed over time, and there has also been a period in the last few months where it basically just did sport at midnight, and then I was awake for another 2 or 3 hours, and then I fell into bed, which is not optimal, and it's also not really something that I could maintain, especially in regards to also being somewhat synchronized with other people. So here's the short history of my sleep schedule. In the beginning, I slept as a child, probably just more hours. And then I went to bed later and later and later. And as I went to bed later and later and later and still stood up around 6 o'clock, I just had less and less sleep. So there was maybe an ideal time where I already made the point of going to bed at ideally the exact minute, and that was 10 o'clock. This was 10 o'clock in the evening, and then I would usually wake up at around 6. So this gave me 8 hours. And what is usually cited as the usual sleep hours is between 7 and 9, and the average of this is 8. But some people actually might need 9 hours, some people might need 7 hours. Some people also might need 6 hours of sleep, but it probably is a Gaussian distribution, and this Gaussian distribution is basically shaped like a bell, and this is also kind of the reason it is called a bell, even though I now made two. The one in the middle is the one I actually am referring to now. So there are probably, most people fall in 7 to 9 hours, and then there are a few outliers here and there, but most people fall under this bell, or I don't know what the exact word for this bell actually would be. Now, what I thought is maybe I'm just on the 6 hours, but I actually did not try any longer to just sleep 6 hours. I actually slept 6 hours plus 2 hours during the day. The problem was just that this was also inconsistent. I also had one nap, usually 20 minutes, and this was shortly before 8, so from 7:40 to 8 I would also sleep again 20 minutes. And then I would work out in the evening, and then I also would eat in the evening. Now the main problem I figured eventually was this. If I fast all day in order to keep my mental demands high, or in order to just keep my mental performance high, the main problem I think is this. If this is a given day, and therefore I am basically here during the day, and I'm fasting, and then I eat. So this would now be basically my calorie intake. If I eat in the evening, let's say this is the spike, and this is 2,000 to 3,000 calories maybe, or maybe 4,000 calories, depending on my needs, then the only way or the only time in which I can digest this would actually be here at night, and also here at night. And then I would stand up again, so basically maybe here the night would end, and here and would the night be. But it turns out digesting is not very optimal for sleep. And also, if you release growth hormone, ideally you would also be a little bit faster. And the growth hormone pulse seems to happen in the beginning of the night. At least that's what I remember from Andrew Huberman's podcast. Now, I don't know. Maybe it worked actually better, maybe it didn't work better. What I realized over the last years is that my body composition just got worse and worse and worse and worse. And I just couldn't reverse it, no matter what I did. I could reverse it once by basically intermittent fasting, eating only once in a given day, and within a short period of maybe 30 days or 45 days, I basically dropped a few kilograms in weight, which was kind of a miracle, but I also only ate once in a given day, and I often ate maybe 500 calories, maybe I sometimes ate 5,000 calories, but because I only ate once in a given day, my insulin probably was a little bit lower all the time, and therefore I mostly burned fat. Maybe that's at least the theory. But it turns out that intermittent fasting probably is not the healthiest. There seem to be a few studies now where not specifically intermittent fasting per se, but the kind of intermittent fasting I did with a very short eating window where people actually would reverse kind of their body composition. They would gain more and more fat and kind of lose muscle. Because the body actually so this is maybe one theory, is that the body doesn't have, this is not a theory, the body doesn't really have an amino acid store. So you can store fat, for example. You can also store glycogen in the muscles and in the liver. But when it comes to amino acids, the only storage really are the muscles themselves. So if you are running out of amino acids and you don't ingest them via a protein shake, for example, or via eating something with protein in it, then you draw from resources and maybe you draw from muscle. So that was kind of the idea and maybe the theory behind this. Now, in terms of sleep scores, what in the beginning of trying to track my sleep, actually my sleep efficiency was usually quite high. And what I also maybe have to mention is that eventually I would just sleep from 0 to 4 a.m. So I would stand up at 4 a.m. in the morning, but what often happened is that I just slept during the day. So my body seemed to just need more. And a fairly reasonable approach that actually came to my mind recently was this. Instead of trying to try to do this ideal sleep schedule which I thought up, maybe I just look at my historic sleep data and just look at, okay, what's the average of sleep I slept in a given night, and that was actually tracked. And it turns out this is not just 6 hours. So what I tried at some point in time was to sleep from midnight to 4 and then 2 additional hours during the day. I also tried sleeping from midnight to 4 and then 20-minute slots during a given day, and also tried 10-minute slots in a given day and then maybe 10 of them. And many of these different sleep schedules actually partially worked, and there were windows of time where I actually was very cognitively capable, I would say. And in the end, I think it is just a little bit less complicated to have a schedule that is just, okay, I sleep at night when all other people also sleep, and I don't have to sleep during the day, and therefore also have to have a location where I actually can sleep. And then there is an additional problem. If you actually have 2 hours of day sleep, then you actually need to optimize for them. So maybe you don't eat in the morning, but if you don't eat in the morning and then you wake up and then your hunger is a little bit reset if you actually sleep for maybe 90 minutes. And there is also the problem that if you have sleep cycles, so you have sleep cycles, they last about 90 minutes on average. Mine seem to be a little bit shorter, but there's also ranges. So maybe the first one is a little bit longer, then the next one is a little bit shorter. So maybe there's kind of a program. Think of it like a washing program, and the washing machine has a certain program it has to follow. And if not all the steps in the right order are followed, then the result is maybe not optimal. So maybe you interrupt the washing cycle at 60% of the time, at 70% of the time, and then try to do the rest like 12 hours later. But maybe it doesn't work. So that's kind of the idea. Maybe the sleep cycles have a very particular order, and I'm just way too not smart to understand this all, and to understand basically the complexity that evolution has put into the design of my body. So that was also kind of the maybe one point. So for the sleep I did recently, and for the night sleep I did recently, and because the day sleep was usually not properly tracked. Garmin now has a feature that actually tracks also day sleep, or naps. Let's just call them naps, but because I slept 2 hours, or then in the last months I actually tried to do one full cycle, which would be 90 minutes, and I often couldn't sleep 120 minutes anyway during the day. And it also, of course, depended on when I actually stood up. So if I stood up at 6, then at 12 I wasn't reasonably tired. But if I already had stood up at 4 in the morning, then I was reasonably tired. I also had other systems where I would switch from going to bed at 11 and standing up at 5 to then going to bed at midnight and standing up at 6. But eventually I went into the midnight till 4 and then 2 hours, and then I switched it to midnight till 6 and then maybe 90 minutes. But then I actually now am going to bed at 10. So in terms of sleep scores now, and this is only now the one part about the sleep schedule part. And there is also maybe the interesting idea that maybe the algorithms that actually make up the sleep scores or create the sleep scores just put more emphasis on me going to bed at 10 a.m. instead of midnight. And this already is a kind of boost in my sleep score, even though my sleep composition per se hasn't changed. And this is something I can't really find out maybe by reading up on the algorithms, but I haven't done that up until this point. So what actually has happened is that in the last, let's say, months, what the highest sleep score usually on a 6-hour sleep that happened from midnight to 6, if it happened ideally, was maybe a 67 in Samsung Health. So what I do have on both of my wrists is one watch. And also due to redundancy, but also due to comparability, I wear two watches, as I already mentioned. Now this is a Galaxy Watch 4 by Samsung, and this is now a Garmin Fenix 7S Pro. I previously had a 6S Pro, and the 6S Pro, at least till now, seems to have been a little bit better in tracking my sleep. And when I actually wore this with the straps Garmin actually delivered, I did have the problem that most of the sleep actually wasn't tracked, and there were several nights at which I wore this watch where it didn't record any sleep at all. But now I switched them to a different band, and this is the same band I'm using on the Galaxy Watch, which is the band of the Galaxy Watch. So I have the identical bands, and even with this band, the old watch every now and then, the 6S Pro every now and then had the issue of not recording the sleep properly. But nonetheless, I hope now that this issue is fixed once I have this band, which maybe has the watch in a kind of more secure and better place. And it actually also feels a little bit better in terms of the positioning. The other one, the one that comes with the watch itself, the watch stands kind of out a little bit more, and here it is a little bit more on my arm. I can't really say what it actually is. Probably it's more maybe in the stand here. And so what I'm trying to say here is that I track my sleep with the Galaxy Watch, and the Galaxy Watch seems to be much more reliable in terms of tracking my sleep compared to the Garmin. Now the Garmin, in theory, is, at least at this point in time, I think, the kind of better health tracking system. You can just be a little bit more a professional athlete on the Garmin watch compared to the Galaxy Watch. This is also the reason I got the additional Garmin, even though the Garmin, for example, cannot be a standalone watch. Similar, not similar, but like the Galaxy Watch can. So I do have a SIM card, eSIM card in the Galaxy Watch, which means that I can actually call people. And this is also kind of my emergency phone. If I am leaving my flat, for example, and I am forgetting my phone, then I, in theory, at least can call people. All the people also on my phone book are synchronized to this watch. And if I'm in the Amazon rainforest and then it's 2 days and I'm running out of battery, then I probably am also running out of battery here, and maybe my power bank also has run out of battery already. So in this case, it would be nice if the Garmin, for example, had an actual phone on there also. And because it has the solar ring, maybe I could recharge it via the sun, but that's just another idea entirely. So let's return back to the sleep scores. Now, the 67 was the ideal sleep. Maybe, I think I actually never got a 68 or something on the, we are talking mostly about the Galaxy Watch because of the not existing reliance of the Garmin sleep tracking at this point. I'm mostly talking about these scores. But in a good night's sleep, they usually are a little bit similar. For example, last night I had, I think, 80 on here and a 77 on here, or a 81 on here and a 77 on here. Now, the 67 was the maximum amount of score, or the maximum points I got for a 6-hour sleep from midnight to 6. Now, if I slept more than this, sometimes I actually got maybe way more sleep because my body tried to make up for the low quality sleep, and then I slept like 12 hours, which is not very nice at all because it also is very long, and therefore, but sometimes it seemed to be necessary in this sleep schedule system I did. which also seems to be somewhat unreasonable, but I nevertheless held on to this idea that maybe it could work if I just ate optimally, and so on and so forth. But maybe also the accumulated sleep, the accumulated low-quality sleep led to my system just being less and less capable. So there are many different theories and many different interacting maybe variables and factors, or variables and factors, using them interchangeably at this point in time. And now I switched to this other system, and as I already mentioned in the beginning, I think, what I now just discovered is with the 8-hour sleep, so this could be the increased time, but it also could be the 2 hours additional the night before, so from 10 to midnight. If I just get these hours and have kind of the same quality sleep, also, I had actually one sleep that was very similar. So I went to bed at 10 p.m. and I actually woke up at around 4, and I still got an 80 in sleep score. So this would mean that either my sleep actually was that much better, or it just basically rates my sleep different. Because I didn't feel that much better, but actually, now, since I have done this for now a few days, and actually I tried switching to the schedule already weeks ago, but it took time to slowly switch my body to this new schedule. What actually has happened is that, well, my sleep scores went up, and I actually can't remember what I wanted to say at this point. So, 67, and now on a given night, I usually have maybe 80. I actually had a 90 already, and a 90 before was a thing that happened maybe once every 2 months, when I happened to sleep optimally, somewhat optimally, at least according to the algorithm, and within my sleep schedule, and I overslept, and but now it just seems easy. I had kind of sleep score envy, you could say, before. I looked at people like Brian Johnson, who averaged 100% sleep scores for maybe hundreds of days or 3 months straight. And also, there's a fitness YouTuber called Shervin Shares, or there are a few others also, who just had sleep scores in the 70s, in the 80s, and in the 90s. And me, with my 6 hours sleep, I thought, yeah, maybe, because it's just because of the 6 hours sleep. But it seems to be the case that if I go to bed at 10, at least the algorithm seems to rate it in a way. If I then wake up at 4 in the morning, again, because maybe my body is still accustomed to the 6 hours of sleep, then I get an 80. And maybe this was just one incident, but I just didn't get one like this before, a sleep score like this before. Now, this is mostly about the sleep schedule. Let's talk about the other factors as well. It seems to be the case that if I go to sleep earlier, I can basically eat more in the evening. Now, I also switched to just eating 3 times a day again. So what I'm currently doing is I work out in the morning, and previously I worked out in the evening. And this I already tried to switch basically a year ago, and the gears are just very slowly turning. And then I slowly got earlier and earlier and earlier. And then I eventually now am kind of consistent with working out in the morning. So I usually start at 6:30 to go to the place where I usually work out, or to go for a run, for example. And I stand up at 6, so I basically immediately, after packing my bag and cleaning my apartment, I then go out for a run, or I go to the gym, and so on and so forth. And then I usually am not in the apartment all day, and I only come back in the evening. And this seems to also be mentally easier, because I had so high demands in terms of working out. It seems to be mentally easier if I just work out in the morning, but it also seems to be, in terms of circadian rhythm, a little bit better. I think this is one of the main things, because if I work out in the morning, then my hunger shifts basically forward in time during a given day. I'm hungrier earlier, and even if on a day in which I don't work out in the morning, I am a little bit hungry in the morning, and then I eat, it seems to kind of disrupt my system, and I get maybe warm hands, and I just don't feel very well after that usually. And no matter, because it seems to be the case that there seems to be some override in my body's ability to. So there is kind of this override. I just think, or some part of me thinks I do want the food, but the other part of me or the body doesn't want the food, and so on and so forth. If I work out in the morning, then I at least have a few hundred calories, which I already worked out and now can ingest. I then ingest usually at around 8, 9 or 10 my protein shake, which is about 660 calories. And this is made up of curd and milk, 500 milliliters of milk and 500 grams of curd. Then I wait until I'm hungry again, which seems to be in between 12 and 4 p.m. So in between 12 p.m. and 4 p.m. in the afternoon. And then I usually eat 1 or 2 of my normal meals. And then I just have dinner for now. Now, this means I usually drive then home after a day, and I then also have dinner. And what I also did is that I usually walk now while having dinner. So I have kind of prepared boxes, and this is somewhat unusual, I think. But instead of having dinner and then walking, I just walk while having dinner. This might also mean that I get actually sun exposure. And this is also something I have prioritized now. Because I'm working out in the morning, what usually seems to be the case, even in winter, is that if I drive to the gym, let's say, then maybe I don't have sunlight in the gym when driving to the gym. But then after, it's an hour or 90 minutes after, then I do have sunlight, at least a little bit. So this is my first sunlight pulse, and this is actually the morning sunlight. And then because I eat and walk at the same time while having dinner, not dinner but lunch in the early to late afternoon, this means that even in winter, if the sun goes down at let's say 30 to 4, that I still get a little bit of sunlight. So I do have at least 2 sunlight pulses, the one at least 5 to 10 minutes in the morning, and the second one maybe 10 to 20 minutes when I walk around having lunch. Now, this also means that my circadian system in terms of light resets again and again and again, and I don't have gaps in which I am not exposed to light for maybe 1 or 2 days, which happened to be the case kind of maybe before. So I prioritized light. I prioritize now movement, especially in the morning. I also therefore move less in the evening. So there seems to be kind of a overall activity curve where I am more active in the morning. And what also happened with this more and more, and also I just experimented in the last months a little bit with just sleeping longer, because maybe that was the issue that I had to fix. It seems to be that my activity is these days mostly like very high in the morning, and then it slowly goes down. Or maybe it goes down in a different way. I actually don't know how it exactly looks. But structuring my day in a way like this allows me to therefore also kind of, I don't know what it allows me. It just seems that it is better. So I get sunlight in the morning and in the evening again, and I try to move in the morning and have the workout in the morning. This also means my eating schedule and my hunger moves forward during the day, in the day. This also means at a given point in time, if I eat, then I have less demands on my body because my body actually wants food. The more hungry I am, the better my body seems to actually digest the food, which is obviously somewhat obvious. If my body is hungry, then it seems to want the food actually. And if I then eat, I don't have that much trouble getting a high pulse after eating, or let's just say I eat 500 grams of pasta, then what often happens is that my pulse goes up, and then my pulse is 80, maybe 90, and this seems to be quite unhealthy. And I also become very warm, and my hands become very warm, especially in summer, and I begin to sweat, so this seems not to be optimal. Overall, what this means now is that I also don't need to fast that long in the evening. So I fast for about 2 hours. Currently, I don't know if this works out exactly like this, but if I then go home at around 6, this also seems to be a mentally nice, quite mentally nice, that I just go home or start to go home at 6 and maybe have a doctor's appointment afterwards or something like this. And then I come home and then I can eat normally. Now I try and am trying still to replace one of my meals with meal shakes, and I also have already replaced one of my meals with a curd shake already. I also tried a second curd shake, and I still have the kind of other meals. What also happened in the maybe 1.5 last years is that I actually switched from being vegetarian to eating meat again, and this also seems to have improved a few things, especially with nutrition. And that's kind of how I actually got to the sleep score. What I'm currently additionally doing is I sleep with a weighted blanket. I don't know how exactly this contributes, but it seems to just make me sleep a little bit better. I'm actually trying to figure out the different correlations. I'm currently using an app for this, in which you can enter different factors, and then it tries to figure out, because it imports the Samsung Sleep, it imports it into the app and then analyzes it and then says, okay, during this night you tick these 3 factors, and these 3 factors seem to correlate with better sleep, for example. And this is something I'm currently trying. I didn't have an app or program like this before. Let's see how that goes. But it seems to be the case, from kind of my own correlational thinking, is that if I have my window slightly open, and if it is winter, then my room is actually cooler. So the cooler my room is and I am still able to bear it, the better I usually tend to sleep. Also, the cooler my body already is, also it seems to increase in terms of body temperature after eating, and the more cooled down my body already is, the better I seem to sleep. Also, if I fast, for example, from the afternoon, so the usually very high sleep scores seem to be happening if I ate a lot in the morning or in the afternoon, and then I just fasted through the evening. And then I had like often very good sleep scores, like a 91 on Garmin a few months ago, for example. And I don't know what the results to say. I also usually sleep with earplugs. I also, at this point in time, actually very often have earplugs in when I'm working out in the gym, because I do have less noise. When I'm trying to focus somewhere, I just have earplugs in. When I'm driving on the streets, I have earplugs in. Maybe I have them a little bit more on the ambient side, so I pull them out a little bit more in order to hear the streets and cars. But mostly, it seems that I seem to adapt to it, and maybe you have to be a little bit more cautious if you hear less, but it seems to be just that it is very loud on the streets, usually. And, well, I have tried sleeping with a sleep mask, but what actually seems to kind of be happening is that, at least with the sleep masks I tried, is the ones I got were the cheap ones, and they actually press on my eyeballs. And if they press on my eyeballs over an extended period of time, what seems to be the case in the morning, that if I wake up, I have kind of blurry vision. So the eye seems to be somewhat deformed, or the lens seems to be deformed, and then slowly it goes back. But if it already deforms in a given night, maybe it deforms then also in a kind of long-term way, and this is something I didn't want. So I'm currently not wearing an eye mask again. What else is there to explore? Maybe the overarching theme of just collecting data. So this is me now trying to optimize my sleep for maybe a year, and it has kind of finally worked. Maybe it was obvious all along that I could sleep like this, but also my alertness seemed to really improve during the day if I actually slept a little bit during the day. And also, I'm currently still doing kind of the 10-minute sleep slots. So I work for maybe 15 minutes and then I sleep for 10 minutes. Or I actually don't sleep, but I just am lying down, and there seems to be something happening, and maybe this is the restoration of dopamine. But Andrew Huberman also talked a little bit about this, so I maybe refer to him at this point in time. And so he does this thing called Yoga Nidra, or he talks about this thing called Yoga Nidra, which is basically also kind of just lying down and doing nothing and trying to not think, maybe also, or maybe you don't even try to not think. I just lie down and I usually have my earplugs in, and then I have an alarm in 10 minutes again. And this seems to not too badly disrupt my sleep, as the sleep scores seem to tell. And that's kind of it. I now sleep also again on a mattress. I tried sleeping on the floor for very long, and this I seem to have a a negative effect on my spine. And so I'm sleeping on my stomach again. I don't know if this is good for the nose and also for maybe the face. So it seems to kind of pull my eyelids in kind of all different directions, because I usually lie on one side of my face. Maybe also not optimal. But it's kind of the overarching theme of how I increased my sleep score. Mostly by shifting it forwards, by extending my night sleep by 2 hours, by also shifting it forward. Not necessarily also shifting it forward, but extending it into the previous night. And that's now how I increased my sleep scores but what is the correct proposition here? I increased my sleep scores by about 20 points.